Welcome to day one of SEC Media Days. I'm Jacob Morris. Storylines galore here in Dallas, Texas. OU and Texas joining the conference, and a whole host of new coaches as well. But the first person we heard from was the man himself. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey took the stage early in the morning to set the stage for SEC Media Days in Dallas.
We're thrilled to be in a city where the Dallas Mavericks made a run to the NBA Finals with a number of players from the SEC, including Kentucky's PJ, Washington's, Arkansas's Daniel Gafford. Rivalry, family. You saw confettis, you saw trophies, you saw champions, you saw celebrations, you saw a quarterback leading the marching band, and you saw Olympic medalists after Olympic medalists. That's the imagery to which we're accustomed in the SEC. And then you saw something new. You saw Bevo. And you saw the Sooner Schooner. And you heard from 14 deep to 16 strong. 16 is our today, and 16 is our tomorrow. We're excited about this year's College Football Hall of Fame inductees that include Kentucky's Tim Couch, Arkansas's Dan Hampton, Alabama's Antonio Langham, and Texas A&M's Kevin Smith.
But the commissioner wasn't done. Multiple media opportunities throughout the day, and later on was asked about old standing Southwest Conference rivalries, and the Arkansas Razorbacks came up. Sankey bringing back memories of 2021's clash between the Hogs and Horns and a memorable finish inside Razorback Stadium.
The passion and intensity, the home crowd rushed the field, which we don't want them to do, but man, it was a pretty special night. And I think that presets the expectation for special nights with these rivalries, and obviously a lot of focus on Texas A&M and Texas playing. So I'm looking forward to that. It's the why, but I lived here when Reunion Arena used to be full of Arkansas fans and Nolan Richardson was coaching. You remember those days. I can remember the centrality of the Southwest Conference when I moved here. I was in Longview, Texas, in college at Laterno College in 1982, and I remember buying a 3/4 T-shirt with all the Southwest Conference school logos on it, and Arkansas was a part of it, obviously, back then.
Nice to see the commissioner giving the Razorbacks some love. No matter what fans might think, Arkansas getting a nod here at SEC Media Days. The first coach we heard from was LSU headman Brian Kelly. He's entering year 3 in a pivotal year for LSU, coming off a bit of a disappointing season in a way. Heisman Trophy winner in Jaden Daniels, and yet the defense let the Tigers down time and time again. Couldn't recapture the magic of season 1 where the Tigers made an appearance in the SEC championship game. That was the focus for Kelly and his media availability. He talked about defensive wholesale changes, but when it was the players' turn, quarterback Garrett Nussmeier and linebacker Harold Perkins asked about divisions going away within the SEC and what that might mean for the rivalry between Arkansas and LSU. And both Nussmeier and Perkins not too bothered about that game potentially going away.
Some rivalries should definitely be salvaged and definitely be continued to play. I know the one us with Arkansas is a pretty special one every year, and I think it should be continued to play every year. But it's not my job to make those decisions. It's my job to play football games. So if you tell me to go play Arkansas State, I'm going to play Arkansas State. So that's my job, just to play football.
I feel like it's cool. I don't feel like it's something that's major. I feel like it's something that we would love to keep doing because it was tradition, obviously, but I feel like we'll be good without it.
Perkins not mincing any words there. Arkansas fans can take that as they would like. Next up was Shane Beamer and the South Carolina Gamecocks. South Carolina breaking in a new quarterback as well. Out goes Spencer Rattler. In goes either Lenoris Sellers or a whole host of quarterbacks the Gamecocks have on their roster. But it's not the quarterback that will be the focus for Arkansas fans. It's the man in the backfield. It's a familiar name, Rocket Sanders, transferring there in the offseason, and he's made an immediate impact to players across the roster.
I mean, he's all about business, and that's what I've seen from him from the day that he stepped on campus. He comes in every single day early in the morning to do treatment, get his body right for the day, and then obviously work out. He'll go do more treatment, come back in the afternoon, maybe do some more stuff with the running backs. He does everything the right way. And he's the kind of guy that younger running backs, younger guys on the team, they look up to him and they see how he handles himself, on a daily basis, because he he carries himself like a pro, and I think that's gonna pay off for him, this year, going forward. Just being able to stay out there on the field and have a big time role on offense.
To no surprise, Rocket bringing a whole lot of maturity to the Gamecocks. Should be interesting to see what he does in an offense that should be totally revamped this year. But speaking of offense is what Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss Rebels do well. They reloaded in the transfer portal and bring back one of the best quarterbacks in the entire country in Jackson Dart. Lane Kiffin is always entertaining at the stand and once again alluded to his social media antics and what makes him such a special follow on Twitter.
I kind of always thought, not that I'm right, because most people don't do this, that Twitter, you just be yourself. Like, I don't do much coach speak, but I certainly don't on Twitter. And so, I was always like, it'd be kind of cool to just be a normal fan and be able to say this and retweet this if you see it, and not really overthink, well, if I retweet this, you're going to think this, and you're going to think this, and you're going to think this, and then, well, my donor's going to think this, well, then that future AD is going to think that, which is a lot of the way coaches think. And I just don't do that.
Welcome back into the show, joined by a very special guest, Josh Pate, GM, coach of Pate State. Do you prefer the title?
Chancellor sounds good to me.
Chancellor, I like that.
Chancellor's like wine glass held underhanded. This is a white, this is a red. That's the vibe I'm going for.
Yeah, all the above. Well, we're going to talk a little bit SEC Media Days, all the above, but we got to talk Arkansas, and you talk a lot about swing games in terms of games that could change a season. You've also talked about swing players. To me, to Arkansas fans, that's Talon Green in terms of how this season goes. It could kind of rides in the hands of number 10. Talon Green, he comes in from Boise State and could potentially swing the Razorbacks a big way.
Yeah, I think probably a quintessential swing team.
Yeah.
And Talon Green's a name probably casual fans don't know. I think more ardent fans know he's that kid who transferred from Boise. Past that, they're probably not telling you a lot about him. I'm sure, folks watching this have taken time and watched everything on YouTube they could possibly find on him. What's funny is I don't think you can talk about Talon without talking about Bobby Petrino, and I'm sure everyone understands why here. But if you think about the merge of those two entities, you can say whatever you want to say about what you've seen of him on film. Okay, you could say maybe inconsistent, but if he ever puts it all together, et cetera, et cetera. Well, my question in the follow-up, and this is kind of rhetorical because it's very much open-ended, is who better to bring that out than Bobby Petrino? And so we get to not only see his reemergence in Fayetteville, but it's also with a really interesting project on his hands. And so if we get C-plus level play, no season to write home about. If all of a sudden, he squeezes extra juice that we may not have seen this far out of Boise, and then all of a sudden you're talking about a surprise team in the first half of the season, then he's on everyone's radar for the back half.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great way to put it in terms of you've seen the potential. I remember it was Utah State. He had a 90-yard run or something like that. You can't teach 6'5", athleticism and all that, and there are worries about decision-making and all the above, but who better to get the best out of a quarterback than the quarterback whisperer, Bobby Petrino. Let's talk a little bit about him. I know you mentioned it. What were the emotions? What was your first reaction when you saw Bobby Petrino's coming back to the Hill and he's going to coach the Razorbacks again?
You see my face. Just a big smile on my face. I'm a believer that this is the sport of football, but it is the entertainment business. Now, that's not the way a coach should think or a player should think, but for those of us who are outside that bubble, that's totally fine to think like that. There's a reason why we build stadiums as big as we do, and we don't build lacrosse venues any bigger than they already are. It's because this is a very entertaining sport. It's not just because the X's and O's 11 on 11 on Saturdays. It's because of the names. And Bobby Petrino's a name that matters nationally, and you can't say his name without everyone grinning, and then they have their own joke or they have their own anecdote. But the point is, you don't last as long as he has in this game unless you know this game. And that's all of a sudden where the face should get a little more serious, because while it's great and it makes for a storybook and it's great to tell around the campfire, if he comes back in and does what we've seen him do at multiple stops, then it's not so much fun in games anymore. It's still, like a juke in the ribs and a ha-ha, but it's also, wow, could that be what we've been missing? And maybe that's a part of something that, like we've said, makes up just margins here and there. This is a game where the ball's shaped really weirdly, and we score in 3s and 7s. And so the margins sometimes are a lot smaller than they appear to be when you lose a game by 16 points, let's say. That's a couple of bounces. That's a couple of calls that should have gone different. Or maybe that's a player that was not developed to the degree that he could have been developed had he been working under the right guy. So look, there's no guarantee. Okay, you can do everything right in this conference and lose 5 games. But you can't have yourself in position to benefit from those bounces. You know, there's a big difference in a garbage time touchdown making it 40-20 versus a late touchdown being the difference in winning 41-40. And to do that, you got to put yourself in position. Can he put them in position? Can their offense put themselves in position to benefit from that? That is always the difference in this conference.
Yeah, it should be interesting. And talking to him, it's been funny watching. He's kind of downplaying. And he said there's no Bobby, we'll say MF Petrino anymore in Fayetteville. It's more just he's there to coach alongside Coach Pittman, and we'll kind of see what happens. Let's go general SEC-wise. You know, you never really know what's going to happen in college football. You never really know what's going to happen in this conference. Is there anybody to you that, I'm not trying to bring up sore subjects for you, but could be a Washington of this conference that could surprise anybody, and that no matter how many times you think they're going to go down, could potentially pop out and surprise some folks?
South Carolina could be one of them. I think Missouri's 2 on everyone's radar. So South Carolina's one because I really believe in the progress they're making as a program. But again, not to throw my own cold, wet towel on everything, but everybody's working hard this time of year.
Yeah.
Everybody's putting in the sweat equity. That's a prerequisite, man. You got to work hard just to be part of this game. Okay, so then how do you make up the margins? Lenore Sellers comes in, their quarterback. Is he everything that they believed he was when they signed him 2 cycles ago? And he's not brand new. He's had a year's immersion on campus. So offensive line was terrible last year. Did you make up the differences there? And then the other one could be Florida. Florida, I think, is a rapidly improving program as well. Got Graham Mertz to come back. Everyone's writing them off because of schedule. And I had one of my odds-making buddies. I said, do me a favor. Keep everything the same about this team, but give them an ACC schedule or a random Big 12 schedule. He said we'd probably put them at 8.5 wins.
Wow.
And so I didn't change anything about the team. Is the point. So they're a prisoner of their schedule. But you know, we watch this every year. We look at a schedule that seems daunting in July, and it doesn't end up that way. Conversely, we look at one that seems workable, and all of a sudden by Halloween we're saying, wow, this ended up being a lot tougher in November than we thought. So you just let it play out. I think Florida, ton of close games this year. One possession either way is 7-5, 10-2. It's just there's not a huge gap in those.
Yeah. Florida's interesting, too, from the standpoint that you've talked about this as well. From a blind resume standpoint, if you put Graham Mertz up against almost anybody in the country, all of a sudden he starts looking pretty darn good.
He was the quietest good quarterback in the country last year.
People quick to write him off. Last thing we'll talk about here, what are you most excited about final 3 days, SEC Media Days coming up?
You know, everyone has talked about OU in Texas.
Yeah.
I think everyone's interested in Kalen DeBoer. Mike Elko at Texas A&M just is sort of out of left field for the rest of the country. Because what happened was Saban retires, DeBoer steps in at Alabama. That's just a volcanic story. And A&M went and got Mike Elko. And they fired a big-name coach and went and got one that's relatively anonymous nationally. I think he'll crush it there.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that means for year one. They may win in year one as well, but I think from an organizational standpoint as well as a tactical evaluation and development standpoint, that guy has all of that mastered. He did it at Duke. So you bring those principles from Duke, you just dip them into bottomless resources. There's not going to be a lot missed. There's not going to be a lot left on the table for A&M.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see week 1, Notre Dame and Texas A&M, 7:30 in College Station. Josh Pate, thanks so much for joining the show.
Appreciate you having me.
Appreciate you. And now we welcome in the program director and the host of the Morning Rush at ESPN Arkansas, Ty Richardson. Ty, before we get started and kind of go through a little bit of Radio Row, can you fill us in on a little bit of your travel itinerary to get to Dallas and make this all happen?
Yeah, so we initially tried to fly to Tampa for a little golf trip this weekend. Apparently 4,000 people flew out. The conveyor belt was messed up, so had a delay. Luckily got a couple standbys, got back. I was a little worried for a lot of my friends, like media people that are flying in this weekend. Luckily it sounds like people made it safe because Love Field was quite busy. I should have accounted for that. That's my own fault, my own stupidity, Jacob.
Well, you got here at least. That's all that matters. And first day of SEC Media Days today, the first coach we saw was Brian Kelly. LSU obviously going through a pivotal year here, year 3 for Brian Kelly. And we were talking a little bit before we got on here. We caught a little bit of the Irish accent flair from Brian Kelly. We know he likes to mix it up a little bit. He chose to do so again today.
He did, yeah. So he is Irish Catholic, so it wasn't making up that
Yeah.
aspect, but like the twang he mentioned, I can't do it. I'm not even going to pretend to fake an Irish accent because it would be horrific and your viewers would turn off the channel immediately. But he like really like moved into it, and I'm like, I asked you, I was like, Jacob, did you hear it too? And you said yes. So we've heard his Cajun accent.
Yep.
The Irish accent's actually real, but he made sure. It's kind of like when you go to different parts of Arkansas and you're fishing or you're hanging out with more of your country friends, and you intentionally, if you're a city slicker like me, I try and sound more country even though I'm not. That was the equivalent of what Brian Kelly did today, even with his Irish Catholic roots.
Yeah, I mean, he's got the roots. He's from the Northeast. He is a little bit of a chameleon with the accent, but we'll let it slide. He's from the Northeast.
Yeah.
Once he started talking, it was interesting hearing him talk about, revamping the defense and all the above, and what he expects from Garrett Nussmeier, a guy who's waited his turn at LSU and is now taking the reins from Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, I liked the fact that Garrett Nussmeier did not have a good game against Arkansas in 2021, and the Razorbacks were able to pull that game out in overtime thanks to Cam Little, true freshman game winner in Death Valley. But I mean, you lose a Heisman Trophy winner. You lose 2 All-American equivalent wide receivers. There's going to be a step back on offense. If you're an LSU fan, you're hoping there's a step forward. They expect to win in Fayetteville this year. I don't blame them for thinking that. Arkansas, if I remember correctly, will be coming off a bye. That's a pivotal game. And I just think, like, you think about that game being at night, the battle for the Golden Boot. Arkansas hasn't won that game since 2021.
Yeah.
So what better way to get back on track in Fayetteville this year?
Exactly, a night game as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. Our Evan Kamiko actually asked both Garrett Nussmeier and Harold Perkins about the game potentially not being an every year sort of thing with divisions going away. Both of them kind of played around and said we like rivalries, but, we play who's on our schedule, which I thought was interesting. We also, of course, saw Lane Kiffin, head coach at Ole Miss, and he opened his press conference with a really, really sad but impressive statement about his father who just passed.
Yeah, Monty Kiffin, architect of the Tampa 2 defense, was a huge part. I say huge part. He's the defensive coordinator on that team that just slammed Oklahoma in that 78 Orange Bowl, which I've been told by guys a lot and gals a lot older than me was one of the best wins in Arkansas football history. The thought was in that game that Arkansas was going to get drilled, and still they drilled Oklahoma. So for that to hit close to home, obviously for Lane as his father, who he called not just a hero but a superhero. I think a lot of Arkansas fans remember how good those Arkansas defenses were, and that again, anytime someone passes away, you remember the good times, and that was definitely a good time for Arkansas football.
Yeah, exactly, and I thought it was really well handled from the standpoint that Kiffin got up there, he gave a statement, again, a really impressive statement, one that I think stuck with a lot of people, and after that he asked, just let me be the head coach at Ole Miss, and just took questions about being the head coach after that.
That's tough. I mean, Jacob, I don't know you have I have a great relationship with my dad, and like if I was asked to do something publicly, I could, but I'd be tearing up, to be honest. I thought he handled himself like if he was to go on. I mean, I don't think of Lane Kiffin as necessarily an emotional guy, but I mean, when you're talking about your dad, that's an emotional conversation. So I don't want to have that conversation with my friends anytime soon. So props to Sankey for setting him up. Props to Coach Kiffin for handling it that way, and then Progressive will be talking about his football team.
Yeah, handled really well, I think, by all around. You mentioned Sankey there. We talked to him for the second time when he came over to the second sort of media session, and unprompted, he brought up, going to the Arkansas-Texas game in 2021. It was great to hear him give the Razorbacks some love. He talked about the passion and bringing Southwest rivalries back to life.
And that's the thing about the conference realignment is when you think about the Big Ten, bringing in Oregon, Washington, USC, and UCLA, that doesn't restore anything.
Yeah.
Like when you bring Oklahoma and Texas, you've got Oklahoma and Missouri, you've got Arkansas and Texas, you've got the Aggies and the Longhorns, you've got not just consequential games, but games that our viewers and listeners would love to attend, love to be in person for, and the ones that were in 2021, it was remarkable. It wasn't just Greg Sankey.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember everything about that night because it was awesome. It was a sense of bringing in the young bucks, the young grandkid, the young son, daughter, whoever that had never experienced that game, and say, this is why this rivalry is important. So to have this game back in Fayetteville this year is big. Hopefully Arkansas is in a position where it's going to be heavily attended, and a game, again, that's going to be at 11 o'clock, 11 or 12, whatever it falls on.
11 a.m., noon start in November. That one should be interesting. I thought it was really well said, to your point by him, where, of course, he's going to be a politician. He's going to sell the SEC, but he said, the realignment moves we made, it didn't change our geographic footprint. These are Southeast teams, and I thought it was interesting. He brought up from the longest trip the longest trip between two schools, it's only 100 miles that added. You're not talking about adding somebody on the West Coast. This is geographical teams, and it's rivalries that make sense.
Hey, think about Northwest Arkansas and the west side of our state. How quick a drive over to Norman, Oklahoma will be.
Yeah.
Now, you're not going to do it this year. You're not going to do it the year after, at least in football.
Yeah.
But you'll have that opportunity to go to Gaylord Memorial Stadium. You'll have the opportunity to go watch the Arkansas Razorbacks take on the Sooners in basketball and in baseball. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine, Tyler McComas, that does radio in Norman. He thinks that Arkansas fans are going to outnumber severely them in baseball. Like when
Really?
Arkansas plays them in Norman, that game will be heavily attended by Arkansas baseball fans, as it was in Tulsa
Yeah.
with basketball. And, I mean, I don't know what situation Oklahoma's basketball program is going to find itself in, but it ain't John Calipari in this basketball program. So there's going to be a lot of fans that travel to Norman for basketball too, Jacob.
Yeah, it should be interesting. And he brought that up as well. We're here for football to talk about football, but it's the other sports that are going to feel this as well. You talk about softball. Oklahoma's won 4 straight
Great
national
point.
championships. All the other sports are going to feel this as well, but it'll be fun to see it with football first.
Like the attendance in Bogle Park has been
Yeah.
astronomical these last couple of years, but when that program steps
Yeah.
foot in
Yeah.
Fayetteville, Arkansas for the first time, the best softball program in the country, I mean, not only is the berm going to be filled, there's going to be like
They're gonna
people
be on
out
the
park-
street.
on
Yeah.
the street, 100%. So it is. I think we always like immediately jump towards football and just thinking about like what that looks like, but the significance of the other sports, particularly softball for Oklahoma, is something you have to monitor. And again, Dave Van Horn alluded to it at Mermaids this past season
Yeah.
at Swatters Club. Sounds like Texas and Tennessee are
Both
coming
coming.
to Baum Walker
Yeah.
Stadium this upcoming season.
Yeah, he gave a nice little hint. He said 2 teams that are orange with a T
Yeah.
on the hat.
Yeah.
Quickly before we go, what are you most excited about day 2 coming up?
I think for me, just like if the Clemson and Florida State stuff breaks,
Yeah.
Big 12, the conference office headquarters is not too far from where we are, Jacob. And I'm of the opinion that, like, the SEC is still in some of the Big 12 spotlight.
Yeah.
I want to see what day, if it happens, that Clemson and Florida State are joining the league, because that is a seismic shift in the sport. We've already seen it with the 4 Big 10 teams I mentioned. We've talked
Yeah.
a lot of Oklahoma and Texas. I know it's outside of the SEC Media Day sphere, but that's what I want to know is when that news, if it does, breaks this week, because there's already reports out there it might. Curious to see if it does.
Yeah, we'll see. And I thought it was interesting. Greg Sankey taking a not so veiled shot at private equity in his speech. That would be perhaps how Florida State and Clemson would join the Big 12. Should be interesting to watch. That's Ty Richardson. I'm Jacob Morris. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.